You crossed the line, Nurse Johnson. Dr. Langston's voice cut through the silence of the conference room like a blade. Amara stood tall, but her hands trembled slightly behind her white coat. She had saved an elderly black man found bleeding. Behind the hospital, a man the system would have let die. She didn't know his name, not yet, but something in his voice, measured, dignified, had told her he wasn't just anyone. Minutes later, she was fired. But that wasn't the end. In fact, it was only the beginning. Where are you watching from today? Drop your city in the comments. We love hearing from you. And if you believe kindness still matters, hit subscribe to follow our journey. Because this story will take a turn you won't expect. Who was the old man? Why was Amara really targeted? And what happens when the one you save comes back more powerful than you ever imagined? Stay with us. You won't regret it. The hospital lights always felt colder after midnight. Fluorescent beams hummed overhead like a warning. The white floors of Harbor Grace Medical reflected everything. Every mistake, every misstep, every soul that didn't make it out alive. Amara Johnson moved swiftly, quietly. Her sneakers squeaked against the polished tile, but otherwise she made no sound. She had done this 100 times. Treating the forgotten, the invisible, the ones no one else would touch. Not officially, of course. Just enough to keep someone breathing until the morning shift dumped them into the system and let them disappear. But tonight was different. He was slumped behind the loading dock, barely conscious, coat soaked in blood, skin pale against the night. The security guard had called it in as some drunk junkie, not worth the ER's time. Amara ignored him. She crouched beside the man, her hand brushing his forehead. Fever. Infection setting in. But it was his eyes that struck her. They were alert, defiant, and oddly measured. "This'll hurt," she whispered, lifting his shirt and wincing at the deep gash stretching across his side. The man didn't flinch. Instead, he nodded once. "Do what you have to." That voice, calm, refined. She grabbed supplies. From the trauma cart, gauze, antiseptic, butterfly tape, and pulled him into the shadows near the service elevator. No cameras, no questions. "Why are you doing this?" he asked. "Because if I don't, you'll die," she snapped. Her fingers moved with precision, even as her heart pounded. "You're different," he said softly. She didn't respond. She couldn't. There was something about him. Something that didn't match the bloodied jacket and sunken cheeks. A scar on his wrist caught her eye. Clean, straight, surgical. Not the kind you earn on the street. "Don't look too closely," he added, catching her stare. "It's better that way." She finished wrapping the wound and pulled him up carefully. "Stay out of sight until morning," she instructed. "I'll bring antibiotics from the mobile unit." He gave her a faint smile. "You won't regret this." But as he walked into the night, something heavy settled in her gut. The next morning, Amara entered the break room, hoping for silence. Instead, she walked straight into a storm. Dr. Langston stood by the window, arms folded, face tight with judgment. Beside him, Claire Voss, HR director, held a tablet in her manicured fingers. And behind them, with her signature smirk, stood Rachel Voss, Amara's supervisor and longtime shadow. "We need to talk," Langston said. He pressed a button on the tablet. Grainy footage filled the screen. Amara leading the man into the hallway, her ID badge visible, the supply closet, the supplies, the bleeding. Claire's voice was silk over steel. "Unauthorized treatment, misuse of hospital resources, direct violation of policy." Rachel chimed in, too sweet to be sincere. "It's not about morality, Amara, it's about liability." Amara's pulse roared in her ears. "He would have died," she said. "That isn't the point," Langston shot back. "This is a private hospital, not a charity. You made a choice, and now we have to too." Claire slid a letter across the table. "Sign it and go quietly, or we escalate this to the board." Amara stared at the page. Termination, misconduct, reputational risk. Her mind reeled. She thought of the man's steady voice, his words, "You're different." She looked up, her voice steady. "No." Claire raised a brow. "No. I won't sign a lie." Rachel's smirk vanished. Langston sighed. "Then you're fired." They expected her to cry, to beg, to fall apart, but Amara only stood, spine straight, hands calm. "I may not work here anymore," she said, "but one day you'll answer for the lives you turned away." Rachel scoffed. Claire waved her off. Langston turned his back. Amara walked out, past the nurses who wouldn't meet her eyes, past the staff pretending to type, pretending not to care. She didn't stop until she reached her locker. Inside were pieces of her life, thank you cards, photos, a lanyard that still smelled faintly of antiseptic. She folded it all carefully as if it still mattered. Then she closed the locker door with a click that echoed like a closing chapter. Outside, the morning light was blinding. The world hadn't changed, but Amara had. Somewhere, that man was out there, still bleeding, still hiding. But something in her gut told her he wasn't just anyone, and this wasn't the end. The letter stayed folded in Amara's coat pocket, as if touching it might scorch her. She had walked out with her dignity intact, but the world outside the hospital doors had no warmth to offer. The morning air bit at her skin. Each step away from Harbor Grace felt heavier than the last, like she was sinking beneath invisible waves of doubt. By noon, the email arrived. A formality, they called it. Immediate termination. No severance, no recommendation, no appeal. She read the message twice, then deleted it without blinking. What she didn't delete was the voice in her head. The voice of that man. The one with the bleeding side and eyes like fire under ice. "You're different." She had no name for him, no file, no paper trail, just instinct. That night, Amara sat alone in her apartment, the city outside humming, like it didn't notice her silence. The walls were white, sterile, like the hospital she no longer belonged to. Her scrubs were still draped over the chair. She hadn't brought herself to move them. Then came the knock. 3 taps, sharp, measured. She opened the door slowly. Rachel Voss stood there wearing a pale trench coat and a smug smile. "What do you want?" Amara asked. Her voice was flat. Rachel stepped inside without permission, glancing around like she expected less. "I thought you'd be curled in a corner crying," she said casually, placing a small envelope on the counter. "But I see you're still trying to be a hero." Amara didn't move. "You came here to gloat?" Rachel shrugged. "I came to warn you. Dr. Langston is filing a formal report with the state board. They want your license." The words hit harder than she'd expected. Amara gripped the edge of the counter. Rachel leaned closer, voice lowering. "You think you were punished for kindness? You were punished for crossing lines you weren't allowed to cross, helping a nobody, disobeying protocol, making the rest of us look bad." "I did the right thing," Amara said. Rachel scoffed. "And look where that got you." Amara turned toward her slowly, eyes narrowed. "Why are you really here?" Rachel's smile cracked. "Because you're not done yet, and I can't afford for you to come back." She left before Amara could answer. The envelope stayed untouched on the counter for hours. When Amara finally opened it, she found copies of her hospital file, marked in red. Unprofessional behavior, violation of trust, risk to institutional integrity. There was also something new, a transcript of a call she'd never heard before. Claire's voice. "We've known about her pattern. This is just the first time we've caught it on tape." A pattern. They'd been watching her. Amara felt the breath squeeze out of her lungs. This wasn't about one act of compassion. It was a long game, a trap they'd been waiting to spring. She stood still for a long time. The city noise kept pulsing through her windows, car horns, distant sirens, a train clattering somewhere too far to save her. Then she picked up her phone. She dialed Ezra Monroe. He didn't answer. But he called back 5 minutes later. "You heard?" he asked, not even bothering with hello. "Yes," she said. "I need the truth." Ezra sighed. Langston's trying to block your reinstatement. Rachel's feeding statements to the board. There's a whisper campaign. No one wants to be seen supporting you. I see, Amara murmured. Amara, Ezra's voice softened. I believe you did what was right, but this system, it protects itself. You need to lay low. Don't fight this head on. Not now. Then when? She said sharply. When they've destroyed what's left of me? He didn't answer. She ended the call and stared at her reflection in the kitchen window. The city glowed behind her like it had all the power. But somewhere in that city was the man she saved, the one who told her she was different. And she had the strange, unshakable sense that he hadn't finished with her yet. The next morning, she woke to find a news alert on her phone. Healthcare scandal. Leaked report shows hundreds turned away from private ERs due to lack of insurance. The photo was haunting. A black man curled on a city bench, gripping his stomach in pain. Not the man she helped, but someone just like him. Her chest tightened. She had risked everything to save one man. But what if that was only the beginning? The hallway outside her apartment felt colder than usual. Amara pressed the elevator button and waited. Her tote bag slung loosely over one shoulder, heavier than it should have been. Inside it was everything she had left from Harbor Grace. Her nursing badge, her journal, and a few thank you cards scribbled in shaky handwriting from patients long discharged. The rest of her career had been deleted in silence. The elevator doors opened, revealing the reflection she barely recognized. Her eyes were tired. Her posture had stiffened. But something deep inside her had settled, like ice forming after fire. She stepped out into the street. The city moved around her indifferently, people rushing past, eyes fixed on their phones, horns blaring in the distance. She used to feel like she belonged in this rhythm. Now it was as if the world had shifted without her. Her phone buzzed. Again. Thank you for your application. Unfortunately, we have chosen to move forward with other candidates. It was the 5th rejection in 2 days. The 5th door slammed shut without hesitation. Amara glanced up at the sky, gray and heavy. Rain threatened but hadn't fallen. That tension mirrored what was building inside her. She stopped at a coffee shop near East 14th, the one she used to go to after night shifts. The same barista still worked there, but today, he avoided her eyes. She ordered her drink and sat. In the corner by the window, stirring the coffee without tasting it. Across the street stood St. Elias Clinic, where she had once volunteered as a student nurse. She had submitted an application there too. No reply. Her thoughts drifted back to Harbor Grace, not to the administration, but to the people, the patients who smiled when she entered their rooms, the elderly woman who called her Angel in Blue, the child who once handed her a crayon drawing of her in a cape. They remembered, but they didn't decide who stayed and who got erased. Her phone buzzed again. Unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. Is this Amara Johnson? Yes. This is Dr. Martina Wells from Hopeline Community Care. We received your application. Unfortunately, we've been advised that your nursing license is currently under internal review. Until that's cleared, Amara ended the call before the woman could finish. She sat frozen for a long moment. Then slowly, deliberately, she pulled the badge from her bag. Her fingers traced the edges of her name. Wren, registered nurse. 3. Letters, years of training, endless nights, every patient she had ever lifted out of danger, all now branded with a scarlet question mark. The badge slipped from her hand and landed on the table with a hollow sound. The rain finally came. Heavy. Relentless. Amara walked without an umbrella, not caring. Her shoes soaked within minutes. Her hair sticking to her forehead. Her coat clinging like skin. But she kept walking, past the clinic, past the hospital, past the world that had turned away. A block down, a crowd had gathered near a construction site. An accident. Someone had fallen. A paramedic knelt beside the injured man, shouting for suction, for pressure, for support. Blood pooled beneath the man's back. Amara froze. Her instinct screamed to move. But she didn't. Not because she didn't want to, but because her body knew what her mind hadn't yet accepted. She was no longer allowed. One wrong move, and she'd lose her license forever. She backed away, breath quickening. The sound of sirens swallowed the street. That night she opened her medicine cabinet. Inside, gauze, surgical gloves, suture kits, alcohol pads. Her fingers hovered over them. Tools once sacred, now forbidden. A crumpled note peeked out from beneath a cotton roll. "Thank you for saving my mother. She wouldn't be here without you. Luis." The little boy. His smile still lived in her memory. She sat on the edge of her bed, soaked in silence, the city howling beyond the glass. She didn't cry. Not yet. But the isolation had weight. Not just the absence of people, but the absence of belonging. She had been erased. Not with force, not with scandal, but with policy. With silence. And yet, somewhere in that darkness, a question pulsed like a faint heartbeat. What if her story wasn't over? The storm had passed, but the streets of Brooklyn were still slick with leftover rain. Puddles reflected passing headlights like fractured mirrors. Amara sat near the window of a laundromat, watching her clothes tumble inside the machine. The rhythmic spin somehow more stable than her life. Her phone was dead. Her energy worse. The fluorescent lights buzzed faintly above her. A low ache settled in her spine, the kind that came from nights of fighting battles no one saw. She stood to stretch, rubbing the stiffness from her neck, and caught sight of him. Across the street. At first, her eyes didn't believe it. He wasn't limping. He wasn't bleeding. He was wearing a tailored charcoal suit, crisp white shirt open at the collar, and leather shoes that gleamed under the streetlight. It was the same man, the same eyes, piercing, alert, but now, framed by confidence and power. He stood beside a black car with tinted windows, speaking briefly into a phone. Then, as if he'd felt her stare, he turned and looked directly at her. Amara's breath hitched. He smiled. It wasn't warm, but it wasn't cruel. It was knowing, intimate, deliberate. Then her phone buzzed, despite being dead moments ago. She fumbled for it. The screen lit up. Unknown number, one text. "You're not forgotten, meet me." She looked up again. The man stepped into the car and disappeared into traffic. The next morning, an envelope slid under her door. Inside, a business card. Elijah Moore, founder, Unity Care Health Initiative. Beneath it, a time, a place, no instructions, no threats, no explanations. She stared at the card for a long time, weighing logic against instinct. By noon, she was standing outside a quiet glass building in Soho. The sign above the door read, "Unity Care, where health meets dignity." Inside, the lobby was bright, modern, quiet. A receptionist in blue scrubs greeted her gently. "Ms. Johnson, they're expecting you." She was led to a private office with floor-to-ceiling windows and minimalist furniture. Everything clean, calm, expensive. And there he was. Elijah Moore. No longer the wounded man clinging to life in the shadows of Harbor Grace. Now he stood behind his desk, perfectly composed. He extended a hand. "I wondered if you'd come." She didn't take his hand. "Why me?" His smile didn't falter. "Because you looked at me like a human being when everyone else saw a liability." Amara folded her arms. "So what now? You play savior?" Elijah chuckled. "I'm no savior, but I have resources and a vision. I need someone with integrity to lead a new project, one I can't run from behind a desk." She narrowed her eyes. "What kind of project?" "A program to restore free care to uninsured patients in 3 cities. Starting here. I want you to lead it." Amara stepped back. "You don't know me." "I know enough," he replied. "I know you risked your career for a stranger, and I know you're not finished fighting." Silence stretched between them. Then he added more softly, "And I know what they took from you. That hospital. Those policies, they treat care like currency. But dignity shouldn't be a privilege." Her chest tightened. He stepped closer, voice steady. You have every right to say no, but if you say yes, you'll never fight alone again. Amara looked past him at the skyline. She saw the city differently now, not as the place that erased her, but as the battlefield she wasn't done walking. Finally, her voice returned. If I do this, I want control, not a title. Elijah nodded slowly. Then we understand each other. The revolving doors of Harbor Grace Medical Center spun slowly, reflecting the late morning sun across polished glass and cold steel. Amara stood on the sidewalk, her new ID clipped to her chest. Director of Community Health, Unity Care Initiative. The badge felt heavier than it looked. She took one breath, then stepped inside. The lobby hadn't changed. Still cold. Still pristine. Still busy pretending nothing broken ever walked its halls. But heads turned the moment she entered. Conversations paused. Eyes widened. Whispers sparked and spread like wildfire. Amara didn't slow down. Her heels echoed against the tile like war drums. Past the information desk. Past the very hallway where they'd erased her. Now she returned. Not in scrubs, but in a tailored navy suit. Her hair pulled back like armor. Rachel Voss was the first to appear, blocking her path with a clipboard clutched to her chest like a shield. You can't be here. I'm not asking, Amara replied without stopping. Rachel moved to follow, her voice rising. This is against protocol. Then change the protocol, Amara said over her shoulder. The elevator doors opened on the 5th floor. Claire Voss was already waiting inside the administrative conference room, flanked by 2 junior board members and a legal rep. Behind her stood Dr. Langston, arms crossed, lips pursed into that familiar line of controlled disdain. You brought an entourage, Claire said coolly, glancing at the Unity Care legal advisor behind Amara. How very theatrical. I brought legitimacy, Amara answered, stepping into the room and placing a thick folder on the table. This is the proposal for the Unity Care Integration Program. 15 beds a month, unrestricted by insurance status, full access to labs, emergency triage, post-op support. Langston scoffed. That's not how we run this hospital. No, she said. That's how we save it. Claire folded her arms. You're not in a position to dictate operations, Ms. Johnson. Actually, came a new voice. Elijah Moore stepping through the door in a crisp gray suit. She is. Langston's jaw tensed. Claire blinked once. Elijah's voice was calm, but carried weight. Harbor Grace signed a resource agreement with Unity Care 2 months ago. We now fund 27% of your non-insurance operating margin. If we pull out, you lose your community grants and your trauma designation. A silence thickened the room like fog. Rachel stepped forward, trying to regain ground. This isn't about funding, it's about discipline. She broke our trust, Amara. Turned to face her. I broke silence. You broke humanity. And now I'm here to rebuild what you tried to bury. Rachel flushed. Claire's lips tightened. Langston looked away. Amara opened the folder, revealing internal emails, anonymously, submitted, of patients turned away. Redacted names, cold responses, lives denied behind closed doors. Claire's voice was lower now. This doesn't change protocol. Amara looked her dead in the eye. Then protocol is the problem. Her voice didn't shake. It didn't. Is it cut? Elijah took a step forward. This is no longer a request. This is a structural pivot. Harbor Grace will implement the Unity Care model, starting today, or the board will be presented with evidence of internal negligence. Langston's mask cracked. You don't scare me. I don't need to, Amara said softly. The truth does. She turned to leave but paused at the door. I didn't come back for revenge. I came back to make sure what happened to me doesn't happen to anyone else. Then she was gone. The door closed behind her. In the hallway, nurses who once avoided her now stood in quiet awe. One gave her a subtle nod. Another mouthed, "Thank you." No fanfare. just recognition. Outside, the wind had changed. The hospital remained. But something in its core had shifted. Amara Johnson had returned, not as a victim, but as the voice they could no longer silence. Amara stood in front of the hospital boardroom window, arms crossed, eyes locked on the city skyline. The glass trembled faintly against the wind. Below her, the Unity Care rollout was already in motion, patients registering for care, staff quietly adjusting protocols they once swore were untouchable. But upstairs, the walls still whispered resistance. Knock pulled her back. Ezra Monroe stepped in, jaw tight, a manila envelope gripped in his hand like it might burn him. His white coat was slightly wrinkled, his eyes shadowed with reluctance. "I wasn't going to show you this," he said, voice low, "but you need to see it." She took the envelope without a word and opened it slowly. Inside were printed emails, screenshots, audio transcripts, call logs. Her name in bold, timestamps, Rachel's signature, Langston's directives. The pieces fit together like poison. Rachel had reported her to the licensing board weeks before the incident. Langston had personally requested video surveillance of her night shifts. There was even a recorded call between Claire and a hospital lawyer, discussing how to contain her before she became a PR risk. Amara's fingers tightened. "They set you up," Ezra said, his voice trembling now. "They'd been planning it long before you treated that man." Amara didn't speak. Rage moved through her like electricity, sharp and cold, but beneath it, a deeper current ran steady. Vindication. "They thought I'd go quietly," she murmured. "They were wrong." She turned, picking up her phone. "Call an emergency board meeting, today." By 3 o'clock, the conference room was full. Tension hung like thick smoke. Board members shifted in their chairs, unsure which direction the fire would spread. Amara stood at the head of the table. Claire, Langston, and Rachel sat across from her, visibly calm, but each bracing like soldiers at the gate of a collapsing city. She opened the file. "There are moments," she said, voice clear, "when silence protects power, but today is not that moment." She handed the first document to the chairman, then the second. Then the audio file played. Rachel mocking Amara's compassion as naive, Claire advising staff to observe but not engage, Langston warning she would embarrass the institution. Claire spoke first. "This is out of context." "Really?" Amara turned to her. "Because context doesn't explain conspiracy." Rachel's face flushed. "You broke hospital policy." "I saved a life," Amara snapped, stepping closer. "And you buried the truth." Langston rose slowly, as if every muscle resisted the truth already climbing his throat. "You were unstable. We had to be cautious." Ezra stood suddenly. "She was the most stable thing in this building. While you sat behind your titles, she did what you all forgot, care." A long silence fell. Then the chairman spoke, tone grave. "We will begin formal review proceedings immediately. Dr. Langston, Ms. Voss, you are both suspended pending investigation." Rachel looked ready to speak, but Amara cut her off. "You don't get the last word today." The meeting ended, in silence, but the walls, those quiet, unyielding walls, had finally listened. Amara stepped into the hallway, shoulders squared, breath steady. Nurses turned to look at her, not with fear this time, but with something deeper, belief. One young intern, barely 20, stepped forward, eyes wide. I heard what you did. Thank you." Amara placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Don't thank me. Just remember it matters." Outside, the sun was setting, burning gold through the clouds, casting long shadows across the pavement. But for the first time in months, Amara walked through those shadows without fear. Her enemies were no longer hidden. And the truth, once buried, now had a voice. The morning air at Harbor Grace carried a weight Amara hadn't felt in months. Not dread, not resistance, something closer to reverence. The kind that came before a storm, and she was the thunder. The glass doors slid open for her, but this time no one averted their eyes. No one whispered in corners. They watched her with open curiosity, some with awe, others with guilt. She didn't flinch. She had walked through fire and come back with the scars to prove it. Inside the East Wing, the once abandoned community health unit had transformed overnight. Posters lined the walls. Access is a right, not a privilege. Billionaires in blue Unity Care vests moved with precision. A mother held her toddler while a nurse explained next steps in Spanish. An elderly man with swollen ankles smiled as he was wheeled toward the intake nurse. Amara took it all in, the sounds, the faces, the quiet hum of dignity returning to a place where it had long been denied. Ezra approached from behind, clipboard in hand, voice hushed. We've admitted 30 uninsured patients in the last 12 hours. No one turned away. She nodded, her chest tight. It wasn't pride. It was purpose. Outside the staff lounge, murmurs halted as she passed. 2 nurses straightened their posture. A janitor gave her a respectful nod. None of them had spoken when she was fired, but their silence now broke in quiet ways. At the front desk, a bouquet of yellow lilies waited for her. No card, no name, but she knew who they were from. She entered her office, a room that once belonged to someone who believed profit justified cruelty, and placed the lilies by the window. The intercom buzzed. Ms. Johnson, the press is here, and so is Luis. Her heart caught. Luis. She walked quickly through the corridor, heels echoing off freshly scrubbed floors, the scent of antiseptic oddly comforting for the first time in weeks. At the end of the hall, a small boy stood beside his mother. Luis's hair was longer now, but his eyes still held that same fire. Mischief and sincerity blended in one glance. He held out something wrapped in brown paper. It's for you. She crouched, unwrapping it slowly. Inside was a crayon drawing. Her in a cape again. This time she stood in front of a hospital, arms wide open. Above her were the words, "You came back." She blinked hard, then smiled. "I never really left." Luis hugged her without warning. She held him tightly, as if anchoring herself to the reason she began this fight in the first place. His mother wiped her eyes. "He never stopped praying for you." Behind them, cameras clicked. Reporters gathered near the entryway as Elijah Moore stepped onto the podium set up in the atrium. Amara straightened, smoothed her blazer, and walked forward. Elijah kept his words brief. "This is not a press event. This is a restoration. The harbor grace you knew is gone. Today we follow new hands, new principles, new courage." He turned toward Amara and stepped back. The room quieted as she took the podium. She didn't speak right away. She looked at them. Doctors, patients, board members, security guards, interns. The same people who watched her fall were now here to watch her rise. She inhaled slowly. "They tried to silence me," she began, voice steady. "With rules, with lies, with fear." A murmur moved through the crowd, but silence only works when we accept it. I didn't. Her words hit like a match. Continued, eyes fierce. "I was told compassion was reckless, that following my conscience was bad for business, that I didn't belong." She paused, letting that sentence hang. And maybe they were right. I didn't belong in a place that forgets what healthcare means. Somewhere in the back, someone clapped, then another. "But I came back," she said, voice rising. "Not for revenge, not for redemption. I came back for everyone who's ever been told they weren't worth saving." Applause rippled through the hall like a wave. I came back to make sure no nurse is ever punished for being human. No patient ever turned away because they're poor. I came back because this— She gestured to the atrium, the clinic, the faces— "is the hospital I believe in." A pause, a beat of silence. And if I'm too loud now, good, because silence was never healing anyone. The applause broke like thunder. Reporters jotted notes. Staff stood taller. Some had tears. Amara stepped down from the podium. But it wasn't a dissent. It was the first step of a new climb. She passed Claire in the crowd, now demoted, now quiet. Claire looked down. Amara didn't stop. She had work to do. Work that mattered. The operating room pulsed with fluorescent light, sterile and bright, humming like a living machine. Amara stood in the observation deck above, her arms folded across her chest, watching. As a young trauma team prepped, a patient rushed in from the street. No insurance, no ID. Just blood, fear, and time running thin. She remembered that feeling. The frantic beat of a monitor. The sterile scent of antiseptic mingled with sweat and adrenaline. The terrible calm before making a choice no one else dared. Below her, a young resident hesitated. His hand trembled slightly as he reached for the scalpel. The attending gave him a quiet nod, but the fear in his eyes didn't move. Amara's voice cut through the intercom. Focus on the bleeding, midline incision. Follow your training. You've got this. The resident froze for a second, then exhaled and moved. She watched his hands grow steady, precise. She saw herself. The door behind her opened softly. Elijah Moore stepped in, his expression unreadable beneath the surgical blue mask slung below his chin. He looked at the scene for a long time before speaking. "You could have left," he said. "No one would have blamed you." Amara didn't look at him. "I almost did. But you stayed." "I stayed," she said quietly, "because I knew what it felt like to be erased, and I wasn't going to let it happen again, to me or anyone else." Elijah nodded. "The program is spreading. 3 more hospitals want to adopt the Unity Care model." She allowed herself a breath, not of victory, of certainty. Outside the glass, the resident was suturing the final wound. Monitors steadied. The team moved with confidence now. Elijah leaned on the railing beside her. "You started this with one act of defiance." "No," Amara replied. "I started this the moment I refused to stay silent." They stood in silence for a moment. Not empty silence, earned silence. Below, the lights dimmed slightly. The operation was complete. Life had been pulled back from the brink. Amara turned toward the hallway, heels clicking softly on the tile. She didn't pause as she passed. The staff lounge where once she had sat alone, papers unsigned, doubt clinging to her like smoke. Now her name was on the door beside it, Director of Community Health. She entered the new clinic wing, walls warm with soft amber light, children's drawings lining the hallway. A small boy waved at her from a waiting chair. His mother mouthed, "Thank you." Amara placed her hand on the glass of the room. The reflection stared back, older, sharper, but alive. She didn't just survive the system. She changed it. And as long as she was here, under these lights, no one would be turned away again. That was her promise. What did this story stir in? We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Your voice matters here. Thank you for walking this journey with us, through injustice, resistance, and quiet triumph. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who still believes in doing what's right, even when it's hard. Until next time, take care, stay strong, and remember, the light you carry can change someone's world. See you in the next story.